It's time. Recently, I've reached 100 subscribers, which for me is an achievement worth celebrating. And after being a pretty low-effort channel doing whatever without any particular rhyme or reason, I'm finally here to sit down and present my first real video. I've been playing Mewgenics a lot, around 500 hours, and I've been itching to talk about it for a while now. I 100%ed it on Steam, and eventually I'll get to beating every area with each class solo. But I legitimately got burnout from all the grinding I had to do, and I figured that I might as well try to show my love for Mewgenics through a video essay theory kind of thing. I'm a huge fan of Edmund Macmillan, and I absolutely adore his work, so I've been waiting literal years for Mewgenics to come out. And not only am I happy to say that I've thoroughly enjoyed it, aside from a few issues, but I can talk about that another day, and I highly recommend giving it a shot. This is an expression of my love for the game, and since I've also been meaning to make a video essay, this seemed absolutely perfect. I know I scrapped my Isaac video I had in the works for a while, and I really want to go back to attempting to make something of genuine quality, so using parts of the Isaac video and doing a lot of new work, here I present you this. Also, this channel is very small, so I would appreciate a subscribe or a like or maybe even a comment. It really means a lot, and I'd love to be able to gain enough traction to be a real channel that can consistently make quality content with a real fan base and a real community to entertain. Before I get into this, I just want to give a brief warning that this theory will contain spoilers for Mewgenics. I will be talking about the final boss, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, you're free to return to this video whenever you like. Earlier, I said that I recommend you playing this game. If you haven't checked it out, please go play it for yourself. I cannot recommend it enough. Make sure you play before watching this video though. Also, there are religious themes in the game shown, and they are not an accurate representation of any actual beliefs that I or Edmund Macmillan have, and I would appreciate the comments being civil. Also, there are some very dark and depressing themes mentioned, and if you aren't feeling that great today, this might not be the video for you right now. If you're still good to go, then follow me into my theory around who Gloria is. Now, I'm sure you're asking, who is this Gloria character? And most regular fans of the game would have absolutely zero idea who I'm even talking about, which honestly is the rational response. It took me forever until I actually was able to even hear the name for the first time. It only shows up twice in the whole game. But where in the world is the name Gloria? Well, firstly, it's mentioned in the game's radio, WMEW 99.9, right before the song Tears in My Milk Bowl. The radio show host laments about their ex-girlfriend, Gloria. So, big whoop. Gloria is just a funny little detail in the backstory of a radio show host that we listen to. What's the deal? For the longest time, I was thinking the same thing. It's just a joke. Until I heard the name again. Except this time, it was during the final boss of the game, when you literally killed God. I remember the line about Gloria being the WMEW host's ex, and I couldn't understand why it was here of all places. I thought about it for a while, and I came to the fairly reasonable conclusion that the WMEW host just happens to be a non-diegetic. That means it's not actually happening in the fictional universe, and it's only for us, the audience, to hear. And that somehow, some way, the host just happens to be singing the theme for literally God. But then that didn't sit right with me either. I kept looking at the lyrics and trying to derive some meaning from them in order to understand what's going on here. Eventually, I came to a conclusion that we're going to need quite a lot of context to get to. Now, for those who like Mewgenics enough to watch this video but don't know the lore of the Binding of Isaac, strap in, because I have a lot of explaining to do. Isaac and his parents lived alone in a small house on a hill. His dad was, allegedly, a guy with an affinity to tech, creation, and science. He also happened to have a bright imagination, wishing to pass that down to his son. And Isaac's mom, Magdalene, being a drug addict too, trying to escape her issues, became a born-again Christian. This decision had massive ripples on the family that ended up creating a gap between the dad, who was atheistic, and relied on what he was able to do with himself, and with the mom being fully developed to Christ and his teaching, closed off from anything it deemed against the church. As Magdalene dove further into her religion, she began watching Christian broadcasts on television, watching televangelists that she then learned to internalize. The dad, trying to cope with the divide in beliefs, goes to the bar and then the casino, and when he loses, back to the bar again. He was a drinker and a gambling addict who fell into sin in the attempts to run away from his problems. This nasty cocktail of coping mechanisms led to constant fights that eventually built up to Isaac's dad walking out on the family, never returning again, leaving Isaac and his mother in the house on the hill. After he left, Magdalene sunk further into her religion to the point of eventually abusing her own son, bashing any forms of creativity, and constantly calling him evil to the point where he internalized it, seeing himself as a demon unfit for the light of God. One day, when all of his drawings and toys were taken from him, he chose to hide in an empty toy chest to cry, and he slowly breathes his last breaths, dying and too delirious to know. And eventually, he dies, leaving Magdalene to be alone with none of her family left. And this is where Mewgenics is relevant again. Magdalene finds herself awoken one day in Dr. Beanie's lab, and her life as a cat hoarder officially begins. Now that the context is on the table, they can finally go back to the final boss, God. We take a look at the lyrics for the female voice in the song, and they match perfectly with Magdalene, saying, quote, "Sacrifice your only son, his breath is mine to take." Cuts deep. She also says the line, "Waters rising from below, drowned in all your love," which I take to be her lamenting about being Christian and receiving God's love being the catalyst for her family unraveling, drowning her in his love. And the female voice seems to be in battle with the male voice, who appears to be responding through verses, citing God's wrath. And this is where the idea of the radio show host singing the song makes no sense. He has no horse in this race. Why would he know enough about Magdalene to have any sort of retaliation against her? The song's background voices even respond saying, quote, "It's your fate," replying with the idea that this was all her choice. It's her fate that she sealed for herself through doing what the title of the song says, digging your own grave. Okay, now, I know that's a lot of emotional and dark themes to handle at once, so as a brief aside, my friend wishes to present a brief distraction, a rant to the one, the only, Mr. Potential Class, the king of inconsistency, the worst class in Mewgenics itself, Tinkerer!
Hey Mewgenics player, have you ever just felt like the game is too reasonable for you? Has your experience not been enough cotton ball closure? Well, we have a class specifically designed to appeal to you. Meet the Tinkerer, or as I like to call it, John Inconsistency. You flip a coin during the run to determine if they're going to be a complete and utter dead weight, or moderately good. Spoilers, they're usually the former rather than the latter. And based on that, you choose if you want to keep them as it was essentially a worse tank that kills itself and soaks up all the injuries, or a worse version of any other tank with inconsistent damage that can sometimes make armor advance. Did I mention your basic attack? Fear not, however. If you somehow manage to roll the dice to win the lottery, you can sometimes get abilities that grant you tech to make the things you create be of higher quality. You'll need about 15 charisma to make it work. You'll need about 15 charisma to make it work fast enough for you to do literally anything meaningful before the rest of your team already deals with every enemy on the board. This class has electricity as the main element, by the way, ensuring they'll be mostly unusable in Dot's future and struggle against a good chunk of the most annoying enemies in the game. But at least they can sometimes stun. Have fun out there. You'll love playing as them against every boss in the game because they're majority made unlocks. And if you want to play
Now back to Gloria. If we can confirm God is definitely the one to be singing the song, then the implications is that Gloria is God's ex, somehow. This is where we come to a fork in the road. From here, you can choose to take the blue pill, entirely write this off as nothing serious, with the radio show host being a non-diegetic DJ for God's final theme, and pretending nothing's there. Or, you can take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. And now for the big reveal. Magdalene is Gloria. They are one in the same. Now, to most, this would seem like a stretch. However, it would explain a few things, and I believe if you'll hear me out, I can make a case for how Magdalene is actually Gloria. Not only would this explain the obvious connections with how God addresses Gloria, but I feel like this can add a lot to her character. Now, I will say, there might be a few things to address. For those who aren't intimate with Isaac's lore, you can point to the Binding of Isaac 4 Souls card called Mom's Credit Card that informs that her name is Magdalene O'Meara legally. So this should be definitive proof, right? Wrong! Magdalene could have simply gotten a legal name change from Gloria to Magdalene. But why? Simple. Once she converted to a born-again Christian, she could have seen fit to provide a new biblical name for herself. This also calls back to the early days of Isaac theories, where, before people knew Magdalene's name, they assumed that the character in Isaac, Magdalene, was in reference to Mary Magdalene from the Bible, a sinner who was cured by Jesus. Kind of how Magdalene in Isaac was an addicted sinner who reached for religion to make better for herself. It would make perfect sense for her to change her name to represent the new her, with her getting rid of Gloria and replacing herself with Magdalene. But then why would God call her Gloria? Because what if God was Isaac's dad? Isaac's dad in the Binding of Isaac just so happens to have the same voice as the WMEW radio show host, and God. If these two characters can be one and the same, why not three? People have already come up with the theory that the radio show host is Isaac's dad. What if Isaac's dad was God and the two things combined together, with Isaac being the reincarnation of Jesus? And while that sounds ridiculous and absurd, I'm sure if you are decently well informed on the lore for Isaac, this would seem somewhat familiar. Back in the earlier days of Isaac, there was a theory going around that the boss of the lamb was Jesus. This was quickly dismissed by the creator, saying that every boss is an interpretation of either Isaac or his mom. But can't these two facts be true at once? What if all of these theories were right all along and they connected back to Mewgenics? But this doesn't fully explain why. I feel like it could be that Gloria was who Isaac's dad fell in love with. We know they eventually got married and they even had a kid together, so it makes sense that Isaac's dad associated himself mentally with the name Gloria, even through the name change. If we look back at the two mentions in Mewgenics, they both are used in upset and emotional context, and I wouldn't be surprised if when he talks about the person he used to love, he would use the name he was used to after so long, not wanting to associate her with the name that represents her evolution into someone entirely different from the person he loved. Now, for the final question of practicality, why is God of the universe an atheist deadbeat dad stuck in his vices? That would seem antithetical to all that Christ should be, but I offer you this reasoning. Let me preface that everything I'm about to say only applies to the game Mewgenics, and I have no intentions whatsoever on blasphemy or representing the real-world concept of God. God is not as virtuous as you'd assume. We see this in his fight and in his song. He's definitely susceptible to anger and violence. What if he wished to experience the life of a human in order to get a taste of humanity? What if he pretended to be an atheist as a cover in order to enjoy what it's like to be a human? If humanity was made in God's image, surely he would have the same urges and desires. If I was a god, I'd probably want an escape from the responsibility and the suppression to just live. With his cover being an atheist who's able to use his creativity with restriction, giving more purpose and meaning to whatever he makes, as well as the ability to fulfill his desires and indulge in what he's created. Personally, I don't see it as something entirely out of the question. And now that I've covered the many, many holes and questions this stretch of a theory brings up, I think that now everything here lines up and adds further context to so many abandoned theories while being able to hold up on its own. And while I probably sound insane, I think all of it lines up surprisingly well. And I hope you give it some thought instead of passing it off as a crack theory that makes no sense. Allow me to paint a picture for you. A god, wishing for a taste of humanity and freedom, takes a human form to live a normal life. He meets a girl, Gloria, and falls in love. After a few years, she starts to be seen with a drug problem. He pays no mind at first, and then they have a child, and in love more than ever, they got married. Then, Gloria's drug problem gets worse and worse until she decides the best solution is to become a born-again Christian, changing her name to Magdalene to represent her evolution to a new person. The god, seeing the rhetoric that his wife hears on the Christian broadcast, sees it as a blatant misunderstanding of who he is, and it greatly upsets him. The relationship then starts to falter. Fights become regular, and he falls on his human desires and indulgences to escape his misery, until eventually it becomes too much and he fully leaves her behind. He chooses to start a radio show, keeping his godly identity anonymous and still being able to go back to owning his responsibility. Eventually, somehow, some way, Magdalene is able to reach in heaven, ready to confront God, who she blamed for the cause of Isaac's death, not knowing that he was the husband the whole time. And God snaps, taking out his rage against his ex and her treatment of their son, telling her it was her fault that this happened and that she ultimately dug her own grave, dooming her fate to misery. That is the story I believe Mewgenics is trying to tell here, despite the fact that Gloria as a name is sparsely mentioned. The context around them holds together a story of coping, misery, vengeance, anger, and sorrow, allowing Mewgenics to be able to have a story that extends beyond the binding of Isaac to a final conclusion of where these characters ultimately end up, finally reaching a painful, hollow closure. Hey, thanks for sitting down and hearing me out all the way through. I really appreciate giving this insane theory a chance and watching it to the very end. It really does mean a lot. Anyways, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment if you want to support the channel. And I really want to be able to get this channel enough attention to cultivate an actual audience and fan base. If you have any feedback or insights or counter arguments towards this, I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. I know this is an absolute stretch of a theory held together by duct tape and dreams, but it was really fun to be able to sit down and put all these pieces together to provide a new perspective. That's all I really have, so thanks for watching. See ya.